will bring over time. This is designed to help our students know about the upcoming market trends and also give them to understand how to provide an edge over it. Renowned speakers have been called in this session to impart or share knowledge with the students. This year, the 2022 edition of this event, uh, the emerging times, the world relies on all the leaders to show them the way and successfully guide them to wade through the times of crisis to emerge stronger than ever before. In this dynamic world where only change is constant and leaders need to know how to adapt to a different situation, so how do we lead in these series of crises that we have been facing, and to take a decisive action and act as a source of inspiration for our teams? Today, the leaders need to have a foresight, and they also need to anticipate change and manage the situation effectively. With this, I would like to invite you to this panel discussion, and through this, the Market Colloquy event, the DOMS caters to several industry stalwarts, and you are one of those, and we are very privileged to have you in this event today. So, warm welcome to you once again. Thank you, all of you, for joining the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lanka ma'am, for your kind words and for comprehensive introduction of our esteemed guests. Now, before moving to panel discussion, let's have the blessing of God with recitation of Kulgit.
जयति जयति वेद्या संस्थान, जयति जयति वेद्या संस्थान, हिमगिरिशृंगो से अभिनंदित गंगाजल करते कलगान। जयति जयति वेद्या संस्थान, जयति जयति वेद्या संस्थान, शिक्षा आदर्शों में उन्नत, जीवन शिल्पी भूरचनारत। शिक्षा आदर्शों में उन्नत, जीवन शिल्पी भूरचनारत। श्रमं विना न किमपि साध्यं रत, यंत्रकला कौशलभियान। जयति जयति वेद्या संस्थान। साध
There's a little internet issue from my side. Jagrati, we can begin the panel discussion, please.
Okay, so we have a list of questions that we would like to ask to your guests. Starting with the first question. COVID-19 has resulted in change in consumer spending trends. How did this impact your industry, and how do you think the budget helped ease that? One by one, we would invite all our guests to present their views, starting with Kapil sir.
Thanks, Jagrati, for this question, and thanks to Doms for inviting me on this discussion. I have been on many platform formats, but this is the first time I would be on any IIT panel. Thanks for that. As far as consumer spending trends are concerned, there are two aspects I can see. One, of course, there was a decline in overall consumption in last 2 years given COVID. Uh, I mean, that was visible in this year's economic survey as well. And the other thing is, whatever spend we are having, there is a big shift in terms of, from retail to e-commerce, the e-learning, digital entertainment, and of course, a lot in terms of health and hygiene. If we talk about the budget, uh, I see budget quite positive, towards increasing the consumption. In fact, I mean, we don't have anything direct in terms of increasing the consumption like any tax rebate, etc. But yes, a lot many programs like PM Awas Yojana, some odd 50 odd thousand crores allocated to that. Minimum support price is more than 2 lakh crore given for that. Uh, you know, uh, PM Gram Sadak Yojana, Manregas, and national highways, all those spends will ultimately generate employment and result into increased consumer spending, to my mind. Similarly, a lot is being tried for MSMEs, startups, with an ultimate aim of increasing our exports and employment. That's how budget is trying to ease this overall stress of reduced spend, as well as how to grow in future years. If I talk about my industry, my industry is a consulting industry. We partner with our clients for, starting from their, internal controls, audits, to their technology and developments, merger, acquisition, everything. So effectively, all these steps taken by government ultimately will help us, create opportunities for us. We will give more and more chances to partner with our clients in their journey towards this growth path. And not only the private clients, even the government spends. So we partner with government in many of these areas to help government, implement these budgetary programs and otherwise. So effectively, overall, I see that as a big booster for overall economy as well as our industry, to be very specific.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your answer. Next, I would like to invite Ramnik sir to present your views.
Thanks, Jagriti. So rightly mentioned by Kapil, in terms of the things the government did it in this budget. To be very honest, if you thinks about the starting of the years, every year, because this budget is get presented by the finance minister. So being if I look at from the general public, so they always feel that you are entering the phase of the life and you will be either venturing into the entrepreneur side, so maybe entering into the corporate world. So when you first draw your salary, so you always feel that how it should be taxed. Governments, if you talks about the statistics, so government gets the tax from from the different sources, but the measures comes from individual perspectives, which the pay contributes equivalent to what the corporate normally paid it. So every time, every year, so people feels that, so from the liquidity perspective and all that stuff, that that money should come back into the hands of the consumer. And what was your question in terms of the consumer behaving pattern? So that's another way to give money, liquidity to the consumer, so which ultimate create the demand, and which ultimately eventually helps industry to grow also, because this is a cycle, because that part is there. But if you talk about this year, so it has not been announced by the finance minister, because the 2 year was challenging from the everybody perspective. We learned the new world from moving into the digital world. even the government also faced. They announced different physical stimulus to revive the economy also in the past also. But this time they focus more on the long term perspective. So when they this time they more focus on the infrastructure boost. So when I say infrastructure boost from the manufacturing sector, so because this bit is more on the infrastructure long term growth perspective. So this has really kicked up in terms of the government spending into the which can really helps the industry to grow and eventually create employments and generate the more income in the hand of the people. So that's whole economy will revive, and the government target to achieve 5 trillions by that time. So 2 years we have lost from that perspective. So yes, so this more is on the government is now focusing, because this pandemic has taught us very differently. So we are doing right now virtual. Had it been 2 years ago, so this will not be any virtual event, right? So this must be we doing it physically at IIT Roorkee there, right? So this is what the world has got changed now. So similarly, government is also thinking from that line. So government is also want to be agile, like the corporate world do it. What we Kapil mentioned about that. So they partner with us in terms of the industry perspective to bringing the efficiency into the system. So similarly, the government is also doing. So when they talked about issuing of e-passports now, because they also see that world is getting changed. Because if we also want to grow and we also want to do ease of doing of business, the government announced different schemes. If you talked about that, which in this industry face that part. For example, we talked about GST. So in recently one of the court room, so the judge made the statement that it is easy to reach the moon rather to understand the GST. So that is what government is now talking about, the streamlining. What Kapil is talking about from the consultancy backgrounds to helping the government also to easing out of that. For example, the government is now coming at with integrated all the customs related all these things, so that it can be ease of doing business for the industry. For example, if we talk about the manufacturing part, the government has given the flips in terms of generating the investment cycles from the manufacturing side. So they have extended incentive in terms of that. If you set up your industries before 31st March 24, and they will give you the tax benefit of 15%. That gives the to generate the investment cycle from the corporate side, apart from what government is doing from the government side in terms of the infrastructure spendings, partnership with the people. So this budget is mix of that. It's more on the long-term growth perspective, on the digital side, and bringing more into the technology-enabled part there. So whether they talk about the agriculture reforms, they are bringing technology in terms of the drone, whether it is from the chemical-free farmings or whether it is the drone for the digitalization of land and all that stuff. And when we talk, Kapil also talk about the MSME, so which contributes to the GDP also. So they have did many things for the MSME. So in the recent budget also they announced that. So they will be integrating the different forums, like for example Udyam is there. So all these they want to integrate it so that seamless one single window clearance. When he talked about the education perspective also, PM always talked about one nation, one tax. So similarly now that analogy he now applies to everywhere. So that is what he's bringing all these changes till this government is there in 31st March 24. So they have announced many things there. So this was from the budget side, and from the manufacturing side, that consumer behavior had got changed over a period of 2 years. We have seen it from the industry perspective, that when this COVID came there, so the whole industry was perplexed at the times because liquidity got stuck there. So consumer, because more emphasis on the on the health perspective. So all of us have seen different waves which came there. So which was more dangerous in terms of second wave, which we really lost many of our colleagues, maybe friends or maybe the relatives there also, that part there. So but the finger crossed now. So now the things are getting settled. So the economy is doing very well. So demand is there, and this is what is happening in the manufacturing sector also. And if you see the current latest results which has been announced by all the listed companies by 15th of this February with the last date. So if you see that overall all the performance was good from all the sectors, except I will say the service sectors, so which has not done well because of this restrictions are there, internationals. Still it is not yet open, but now government has getting opened up, and now people will be traveling abroad and all that. So service tax sector has really hit bad, but otherwise I will say that now economic is doing very well. So that is what government also thinks from the long term perspective. So that's what they focus more on, the long term development.
Thank you, sir. Now I would like to invite Sheshadri sir for your views.
Thanks, Jagrati. I think first, let me sort of say in terms of what was some of the trends which we saw during COVID as an industry. So, and I'll talk in terms of broader FMCG industry as well. So, see, I think the impact on the industry was different in the three waves which we saw. The first wave, pretty much with the lockdown, was it's unprecedented, right? So for example, take case of a company like General Mills. So General Mills has a big share in commodity. So Pillsbury atta, you would know, the the maximum pressure actually came on the supply chain piece, because what happened is the demand suddenly went through the roof. Why? Because in home consumption increased, dine outs were restricted, and you would actually see, and you can relate, many of the family parents started baking at home, so we have cake mixes, so all suddenly the demand shot up, right? The supply chain is not geared to address a 2x demand in such a short period of time. On the other hand, all B2B business, so even if I say, take our own example, we have a big B2B business where we supply cake mixes to bakeries across India, market leaders there. So almost all bakeries shut down. They were Cakes were not being sold. Bakeries were under lockdown. So the actually we had to find ways to absorb our fixed cost, because pretty much plant we did not have any demand. That was the case in for wave one. Wave two, it was slightly different. So even some of the offshoots which happened was e-commerce. Suddenly, as a channel, e-commerce share grew, modern trade, etc. So these channels were impacted, and then things started to slow down in terms of impact started to taper off. So the biggest, I think, impact, and what almost all sectors, so manufacturing sector, realized is one, importance of having an agile supply chain to sort of being able to adapt to such situations. Second, the challenge we faced was also in terms of logistics, because logistics was under massive pressure. See, India, it's a known fact that we are not competitive when it comes to logistics. If you just to sort of throw some numbers, so the logistic costs for India is anywhere from 14%, and if you 14%, mind you, is not a small number. If you track some of the financials of companies actually do pat of around 14-15% to 17%. So 14% in itself is a massive amount of spend on logistics, also because of lack of infrastructure in terms of logistics. If I talk about frozen logistics, it goes up to 22%. If I compare this with a developed economy, it's anywhere around 5 to 6%. So we ourselves, so we become, no, we are not competitive just because of the fact that we don't have that infrastructure, right? And that got stress checked during COVID, and we had to make choices where you either supply to the you either reach consumer at a higher cost, or you let go of the sale. And everyone actually reached the consumer and pretty much took a hit on our PNL, right? So that is one trend which we saw during COVID. I think the third trend in terms of broader macro picture is, see, rural consumption has remained muted for a period. Even pre-COVID, there were pressures in terms of consumption being slow or being muted. In wave one, actually, we saw rural consumption picking up, because all the urban areas were particularly hit with COVID, and the impact slowly, there was a time lag for it to reach to rural India, right? But now I think the rural consumption has, again, it's not what we expect to be, and hence the expectation from government was to also see that can they provide some stimulus to revive consumption, particularly in rural. So that was a broad industry, I would say, ask or expectations from the government. Now, what did the budget do? So I think, see, it was a fairly balanced budget, and I would actually, I like the budget mainly because on 3 to 4 counts. First, see, the choice for the government was to be tactical and to sort of invest or make choices in terms of revenue and spends versus capex and infrastructure, right? So this is always a choice for any finance minister or for any government. But the government actually has been consistent, and if you see and if you compare economies across the globe, we are far behind in terms of infrastructure. So see, it's a matter of, we keep saying that we have to be manufacturing hub, replace China and all those kind of things. Just see what's the China GDP. I'm sure you would know. So China GDP is 16 trillion, right? 16 trillion. We want to be 5 trillion in FY26. And China, it's not that China has leapfrog in last 2 to 3 decades, where at a point in time around 78 to 80 we were at similar GDP levels, not at such a vast difference. But see how they were able to do that, and one of the key things was because constant focus and investment in infrastructure. So there has to be a starting point for India to take infrastructure seriously, and government sort of did that, has done that. If you see the investments in even in previous budgets for the overall infrastructure, roads, the amount of kilometers of roads getting constructed, everything, it's been there, and that focus continued. So it's a long term solution. So what it will do is, once you get that investment, it will create job employment. Once it creates job employment, the demand and the consumption will come in, and it will come in rural as well. So that's the objective of the government, and they stayed true to their course, where they the 34% might be slightly misleading when government says they increase it by 34%, but having said that, the focus on the right area. The second biggest thing in budget, if you see, is in terms of logistics, where they talk about centralizing or union of 7 engines. So they want to have an integrated logistic chain. So rail, road, waterways, airways. And actually, if you go in some of the developed markets, you will find seamless transportation. Like you can go from road, rail, and waterways and reach your goods. You can move your goods using all three seamlessly. Whereas in India, if you see, majority is still road, and road by scale is most expensive, because you can only transport, say, a particular ton of goods in a particular in one truck, right? Whereas in rail or in waterways, the tonnage which you can shift is much more. So the unit economics works starts going down when you start using or integrating the entire value chain. So if you read through budget, that is one big focus area, is what they have said. So digitizing as well as logistics, an integration of logistics. So that's the second piece. The third piece they talk is in terms of digitizing agriculture and digitizing rural India. Now, if you see, banking has not reached rural India. And I'll give you an example of General Mills itself. We purchase anywhere from 400 to 500 crores of wheat. Now is the wheat season, right? The issue with companies like us, and so the purchase would be anywhere around 10,000 crores if I put together all our competition, us, etc. The issue is, one, farmers are scattered. So we would purchase, so we want like 1 lakh tons of wheat. The farmers are scattered. They don't have a bank account. Now, how would you, as an organization, we can't, of course we can't, so no organization or no MNC, or we can't purchase in cash, right? You can't like give out 10,000 crores in cash. And hence a need of a middleman, who the only um, capability which a middleman would bring is to consolidate these farmers and have a banking system backend office where he's able to transfer huge. He's able to give us wheat and transfer this whatever 10,000 crores to the farmers. But the main issue is, if the farmers themselves become self-reliant, if you are able to reach to rural India, financial inclusion, then the overall economy becomes much more agile and much more efficient. So the other focus area, if you see, is they want to convert 150,000 post offices into credit or say banking operations, where farmers can, uh, when I say farmers, say rural India can sort of get access to credit and to the banking services, right? So this again, I think, will impact favorably for industry, for manufacturing in general, and for FMCG in particular. And the only last thing I would say is the fact that government did not give out any populist measure. See, given the environment of so much of elections, if they would have come up with any populist measure, we would have not raised our eyebrows, frankly. We would have lived with it. Many governments in the past have done it. But I think that's again a choice where they were bold enough to say that they did not go with any populist measure at the cost of coming out with the efficient budget. So overall, I think it's a very well balanced budget geared towards long term growth. In short term, there will be hiccups. Back to you, Jagrati.
Thank you, sir, for your opinion. The next question that we have is uh, about the privatization. In the budget, the target for privatization was slashed to 78,000 crore rupees in the next year's estimate at 65,000 crore rupees. So how do you think that this affects the LIC IPO and BPCL privatization? Again, we will start with Kapil sir.
Thanks, Jagriti. Again, I would say government has now come up with more realistic targets than something imaginary, which it was. So, like there are a couple of things which we need to understand. The intent, which is the most important one, the intent of the government is to privatize or divest. And they have effectively they have proved that with this investment of Neelanchal Ispat and Air India in the recent past. Uh, so now LIC IPO, it is going to happen. We all know that. I mean, if we talk about last 10, 20 days development, this is going to happen. At what level? I think it is still a question, and rightly so, because if an indication which was available there in the budget that this is going to be the LIC IPO's overall value, that was a market sensitive information. So what government is saying, what finance ministry is saying, that these are the targets we have kept or reduced to make it more realistic, but that does not stop us overachieving these targets. So, seven out of 78,000 crores, if 12,000 crore is done Nilanchal and Air India, mathematically it gives 66,000 crore from LIC IPO. But I think it may be more than that. Next few days will tell us. Similarly, BPCL, that is again, uh, it may it may have been delayed, but uh, it's only delay, I would say, then saying that it may or may not happen. It will happen, to my mind. Yes, of course, the impact, if you talk about, uh, I think, I mean, I can talk in terms of stock prices, that BPCL was down more than 25% from its peak. But on the other hand, if one reads the overall balance sheet, the value unlocking which government is trying to capture, that is humongous. And I'm sure this is going to happen in coming year. In fact, this is not only about the size or what will happen. See, the simple estimate that LIC IPO itself will cause an increase of 1 crore demat accounts in country. That's a large number. And I personally feel that more and more participation in industry via this stock market route, it will help economy in overall terms. So from that perspective, I really don't see any big negative impact on both the privatizations, BPCL or LIC. Rather, I would say it's a right move taken by the government in this budget.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your answer. Next, we would move to Ramnik, sir.
Okay, thanks, Jagriti. So, your question was from the government. So, I was just thinking. So, what is that? So, 2 years. If you look at the pandemic and all that situation, when I talk about the disinvestment from the government side, and purely if I look from the private sector side perspective. So, if we have to participate, okay. So though we are not participating in Air India and all that stuff, but I was just thinking that the kind of the legacy we have in all that in the government systems. Your government want to be agile. So why this question of privatization came? See why. See, if you look at that, the government also wants the money, to you get it out of that. So there are different ways are there. So you have a limited scene, you can get it from the tax side. So when Sheshadri was talking about from the different hurdles which we have as compared to the to become so globally competitive. So there is some restrictions is there. So now if you want to bring more investment into the country also, so you have to you can't rely more on the taxes. So this has happened over the year, over the, I will say, over the decade, not only decades, more than years. Even the king was there, so he also want to tax everything. So because he also want to run his kingdom. So similarly, the government also feel that how you want to run the kingdom. But the time will come when you can't, tax each and everything. So we have seen the situation where you have to pay 70% of the tax there. So now we have brought it down to, lower side. So when I talked about that investment cycle, which they have asked the corporate to do it, and they give the lucrative tax rate of 15%, so you have to find now few more sources to get the money back into the system to run the, that part of the country also. So they have looked at the disinvestment part there. So they have reduced the target. So because there is a delay, because of this pandemic also has impacted that part. So now we can talk about there's a digital world that you can do due diligence and all that stuff. Even Air India hasn't done it that part. But if you look at from the Air India perspective, so there is a legacy behind it. There is an emotional connect was there. So from the because it was taken from Tata, now it is going back to the Tata, because the way they welcomed and all that stuff there. Now government is also tweaking the SEBI rules also, to be very honest. So that if you talked about the SEBI rule, the pricing formula is 26 weeks or the 10 weeks, which applies for the every corporate there. But now they want to change it. So because they also know that when Kapil was talking about the valuation part and the stock price there, so they also realize that the value which they want to encash it, because ultimately is the money, they want to bring it back into the table. So they know that the kind of the pricing formula, when he talk about 25% down in the BPCL, and if they take 26 weeks as the benchmark for arriving at the formula for the market cap of that company, so they will not get it what they want it. And if I talk about LIC today, so I was talking to many people in the industry, and they were talking about the IPO. So it is like that. If you seen the, I don't know how many have seen the, if you are traveling by the train, or maybe you are in the traveling by the air, and you're in the air, or maybe in the on the railway tracks. So sometimes you get the from your pilot in the air. So because of the traffic congestions, so we are not getting the time to land at the Delhi airport. Okay. So similarly, LIC also has done, IPO has done the same thing. So many people, shifted it back. So they just, it's in the parking, yard right now. So many IPOs are, behind. So they're just waiting that they get clearance, then they will come out, because it's a huge chunk. And when you talked about the demat accounts, because all of us, maybe all my parents and everybody has the LIC connected there, and you are getting the demat account, 1 crore is there, because this is the trigger point is there, because you're getting that at discounted value from that perspective. So coming back to that, so this government has revised it. So there is a legacy problem in the government infrastructures there. So Kapil knows from the government side because they provide consultancy government to prepare all that side, Yeah, Kapil. So there is a legacy, So when you talk about Nilanchal, so I should not talk about very categorically about one of the disinvestment from the government side. Even if you have to do that acquisition, you have to go and visit also. Sometimes labor infrastructure problem is there. So you have to ensure the safety of your people also. From the government side, because India is a typically different states are there, so different inherent problems are there. So that also delay the process, to be very honest. But they can't come and tell in the public they have their own real problems which is lagging behind them to reduce their target. So PM is very famous, is a marketing guy, so he always speaks differently from the BJP side. So he always put all these things into a different basket to sell that part. So similarly, so what Kapil was also mentioning that so it will really will happen. BPSL is there in the paper also. We talked about Vedanta is looking to acquire that part. Mr. Anil Agarwal mentioned very categorically that he will do that part. So yes, so because of the which I talked about that, so everybody want to get this from the private side. The agility is there. That's what government is diversifying, right? So they are not able to do the agile work. So what PM want to do it. So this is another way to speed up the economy, so which will generate employment, bring efficiency into the systems, and create value for the economy, and which they want to achieve over a period of time. Yes, it has been delayed because of the in his own problems which they will never talked about, and because of the pandemic also, but nevertheless it will be achieved over the period of time, because ultimately target is that before 31st March 24 they want to do all that part. So because he did a bold decision starting from the demonetization, which we have seen that part, to challenge that black money and all that stuff. We don't know whether it has been successful or not. Still, if you heard about the latest fraud of ABG, 20,000 crore, now we are fighting about which government has done that part. So yes, it has delayed, but it will really happen over a period of time. So because they also want to encash at the good money value, and which they are tweaking the SEBI rules also. Now we will hear about Sheshadri also, what he want to say about that, the investment part.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. So, Sheshadri sir, you go next.
Yeah. So, see, I tend to agree with what actually both Kapil and Ramnik has said. So, see, one, I think government is more realistic now when with the target what they have set. If you so you remember the original target, it was 1,75,000 crores. Then it was brought down, and now again they have slightly tweaked it to, I think, 68 or 70 something. The reason why of 1,75,000 crores is also to set the cat among the pigeons, right? It's like to set and talk about the intent. It's like saying this is what we'll do and taking a position versus. So I don't think anyone in their right minds assume that we'll be doing 1,75,000 of privatization or disband by the timelines as to what we said. I think, but then it is important to set that, take that position so that you know that this is what this is the position of the government. And let me tell you, so you would have seen all these private listings, right, which happen, something like Nika, Paytm, even companies like this, and take anywhere from 2 to 3 years to get the work actually starts 2 to 3 years, or maybe sometimes even 5 years to get listed. So even in private sectors, getting listed and all, it's not a, they creates millionaires, right? So it's not a small exercise. You have to, so there are investment bankers, due diligence, a lot of things has to be done. To complicate things here, I think in government there is also, apart from economics and operational issues, there is also politics, because it's a long standing. So see, you never know that. So if I'm just taking a name or something, it's not to be considered otherwise, but you will always find opposition saying if Reliance bids or if Adani bids something, then they will come and say, okay, it's a hand in glove thing, and then the process in itself might get delayed. So in itself, see, by nature, such a massive exercise does take time with a lot of operational difficulties, due diligence, and we all know that it's hardly efficient. The companies, half of them are not run efficiently. The intent from the government is not to throw good money over bad money, right? And pretty much in Air India, that was it, where every year they would spend some 40,000 crores to keep it operational, and with it moving to Tata, it's like a cost avoidance what they have been able to achieve. And there are similar intents or some of the revenues expectations from other BPCL and all those things, but it will take its own time. So I think now the government, I think it's time to set realistic targets, right? So we have set 175, you moved it down to 75, now it's 68, and I think 68,000 crores is very realistic. With LIC and one more thing coming, I think we should be able to exceed. And I think we are very close in terms of LIC, the 5% whatever listing. I think we are very close. And it's again a big step. So I think the first step has been taken in the right direction. So at least Air India, there is something. There is a one success has been achieved, at least from an operational standpoint. That's been achieved. I think things will again. So there are long list of companies which are being planned, but it will take its own time, and it's natural. I think we have to take it in our stride that it will take time, but then as long as the intent is there, it should happen. Back to you, Jagrati.
Thank you, sir. It was a very good answer, all three of you. Now, the next question comes about cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency has been the industry buzzword for years, and this year, Finance Minister also touched upon the RBI's digital rupee, and she has introduced a tax on cryptocurrencies, but she hasn't given us any regulations around it. So, in your opinions, how will this thing work? Starting with Kapil sir, please.
Thanks, Aman. This is a much talked about topic in last few days, and because of the love Indians had shown for cryptos, so probably government had to come up with something. Let's first talk about the central bank digital currency, the RBI's digital currency, which they are talking about. I feel so. Number one, it's a it's a different form of currency than a paper. It's a kind of I would say legal cash towards legal cash, legalized cash economy. It would appear as a liability on RBI's balance sheet the way it is today for currency notes or any sort of that thing. Uh, now I see this as a very bold step because of a couple of reasons. One, I think some 85 or 87 countries were or are trying for their own digital currencies. When I'm saying 87, 85 or 87 countries, that is approximately 90% of worldwide GDP. These countries possess. So I'm talking about those countries. Then only 35 countries out of that, or maybe 34, were able to do the pilot run with a success rate of only 9 countries who to adopted this digital currency fully. So if we are able to implement this step, we would be effectively the first movers. And the benefits I see, I mean, the simple example Sheshadri mentioned about, how difficult for them to interact with the farmers directly, but through a middleman. Once digital currency is there, probably, I mean, all our assumptions right now, probably all that 10,000 crore would be disbursed in that form, because even if a farmer is not having a bank account, will have a capacity to accept that. Of course, there are it is subject to having that platform to have that digital currency and all that. I understand that, but yes, there is a big scope which I am seeing there. uh, a lot of government programs, programmable payments like subsidies, lendings, everything may happen in that, in that particular this thing. It should also help cross-border remittances as well. So this is about this digital currency, and I am quite hopeful. Uh, and this gives an answer that why government has been so skeptical about cryptocurrencies. You see, while government acknowledges that crypto is reality of life today, and that's where probably it has come up with a tax. So by taxing it, of course it is not legalizing it. They have been clarifying that tax laws are not something which will legalize use of crypto. But on the other hand, at least it has recognized as an asset which you can play with, I would say. So something is there, something is better than nothing. And see, the flip side of I mean the other side of the coin, the government's problem is, for India very specifically, it was and it will be used for terrorist funding, money laundering, the two biggest problems in India. So it is very difficult for the government, to my mind, to accept that as a currency. And one can always debate that higher tax rate, is it right or wrong, but somewhere I see that as a kind of discouragement for people to use that as a medium of I mean uh, sending funds outside India for any illegal reason. So the crypto, to my mind, uh, at least for some time to come, will remain as an asset only, probably will not become an official tender, while the digital currency may play a bigger role if implemented successfully. And when I say implemented successfully, that goes true for every damn aspects of the budget. I mean, budget has talked about a lot many things which we just talked about. I mean, Ramnik or Sheshadri also mentioned a lot of schemes by them, but the ultimate uh, success is in implementation, where we actually lack, I would say, at many places. So, subject to implementation, this is going to be a big booster for our economy, that digital currency.
Thank you, sir. I myself agree that cryptocurrency should be looked upon as some assets for at least 3-4 years for now. But I'd love to know Ramnik sir's opinion about the same.
Thanks, Aman. So when you talked about crypto, it take me back to my childhood. When I was remembering that, we are talking about crypto. So I've grown up hearing about Sumti Mata. I had heard about the committees people used to put it, and the many Ponzi schemes which has been come up. So now we are talking about the crypto. We have a very fertile minds, not only in India and the globally also. Okay. So it's talking about the people talking to the Akbar. So that fertile people have come out with some new scheme. What now we should we do it? So that is what Kapil was talking about that. So is it now legal or it's a illegal, right? So that is a better debate there. So no, Birbali was very smart. So he told that why not to tax it first? Forget about whether it is a legal or illegal. First tax it out. Less the company, some money should come back to us. So whether it is a gambling, whether it's a horse race. So, over a period of times, many fertile people have come out with innovative ideas globally, and as well as, being Indians, we always follow the global. So earlier I thought that Indians are more brainer than the European and other people. Now I feel that they are more fertile than us. So they come out with all these ideas. So first is to get the tax. Okay. So Modi was also very smarter. He thought that he made all that demonetization. So, okay, so result has not come out. So now another, he want to get rid of cash. Now the crypto has come as a problem for him, right? So now everybody was, approaching him. What is the law? So how the global world is doing, and nobody has come out with the law first. First is to tax what he did it. Okay. Now the challenge was that if everybody comes with his own currency, so he has to put the lock. The government has to put the lock. What the RBI will do? They will also lose the job because everybody has the money in the market, which Kapil was talking about, that the tariff funding and the problems that so Ponzi schemes will be there in India. So first is better ways to tax it. Then we will come out with the regulation. When they come into the budget, what they said about tax at 30%, 1% TDS, GST. People were sleeping at that time. They suddenly come out of it. No, we will also put GST also on that part also. Now the debate was that okay, law has been made, tax has to be paid. To whom tax has to be paid? It is the outside the country. We don't know it is who is it is transaction is happening in between or what. Whether carry forward is allowed. We have a very fertile mind. People as reading the law in a fine print. One said it, okay, you are allowing the carry forward losses for the business. Why not for allowed for this also? Why no set off is there? So now all these things are coming out because so many fertile brains are there. So the challenge part was that if we don't come out with the some solution to that, so it's a big headache for the government. Okay, because the kind of the people which we have, when Sheshadri was talking about that, so I was referring to the income tax section which talks about that you can't purchase more than 10,000. And I was little wondering about that when they are buying from the farmers and who only have the cash, as a procurement there, and being working in MNC. And I can understand the controls which Kapil was mentioning there. When he will go from ENY to do the audit, so he will scratch his head because so when what will happen, I will tell you. So when the team from ENY, sorry Kapil, I'm just taking the name, don't take it otherwise, So Kapil is very expert in putting the internal controls and all that stuff. And Kapil and will go into the manufacturing sector to Sheshadri MNC. I worked in MNC in the previously. So now in the promoter, we are also more fertile. So they will come out with the internal control. We will say there is no crypto asset is available. Okay. And there is no disclosure from SEBI. No company act has made it. Sometime fertile mind come out, then government don't have any option. Huh? First is to tax it. So made it not from the legalist perspective to just stop that transaction. So I was reading the newspaper that Amitabh Bachchan has become crorepati in crypto also. So nobody knows. So Panama case, many things are there. So similarly, what happens that to regulate such a huge populated country, wherever different stakeholders are there, where we have a lower middle class, and rich and high HNI are there. So many stakeholders are involved there to regulate such a country with a parallel currency. Which crypto is nothing as a parallel currency. Then government said it, we will come out with a digital currency. Hold on. So you need to carry, what the technology has made us change, demonetization. So no one's talking about, Paytm. Even if you go to the vegetable market, you first ask this question, bhaiya Paytm hai ya nahi hai, because this is what we thought it that things has could change at the footprint also, which Sheshadri was talking about that being a farmer. So if he's coming from the farm, taking the fresh vegetable to the market, so he's getting the Paytm. So which will easily pay to the Sheshadri in terms of getting the money into the circulation. So similarly, government also want to regulate it with this tax part. First, they stopped this transaction. Now they will come out with the, after learning from the, industry or fertile people, what kind of the strategy now they will make it. 30% is very high tax, So now they will come out with the regulation. Of course, that digital, what the government want to move forward that perspective from the demonetization, which Kapil also mentioning that part. When the government will come with RBI, digital currency with the blockchain technology, which we are talking about the future, it will really help us, the people who are, dealing with the regulated money. Okay. For them, it is very easy to do all that transaction. So just imagine if you go to the restaurant and you need to carry the, cash. Nowadays also we don't carry the cash, So we have the Paytm wallets and the Phone Pay and many other, instruments are there, which helps us. But if the digital part is there, so life become very easy, not only from the individual person, for the corporate world also perspective. So I no need to go to the bank to transfer that part when the blockchain technology is there. So I know it can be transferred very easily across the world also to smoothen that transaction. So that is what the things will happen from the digital thing. It's a new subject. So it will take on time to, settle down, to come out the principles and governance and all that stuff. But right now the government took the right step to, taxate it so that they can stop that part which Kapil was referring to, that, creating the nuisance into the system in terms of the terror funding and all that stuff and the parallel currency there.
Thank you, Ramnik sir. I personally loved how you explained the phases of a regulation. It actually makes us understand what kind of thoughts they have while sitting in the parliament. So thank you so much for that. Now I'll request Sheshadri sir to please share his opinions.
I think I'll borrow one thing from Kapil. So Kapil said that Indians love crypto, right? I think Indians love speculating, right? So because I think personally I don't think 30% is high, and I'll tell you why. Because even the highest tax slab rate is 30%, right? I think above 15 lakhs it's still 30%, and specifically for it being a speculative sort of so any income which you would earn by through cryptocurrency or selling, it's a sort of speculation, right? And hence the government, and it's a starting point. So the starting point can't be a lower tax rate.
Sheshadri, just to interrupt you. So being a salaried guys, so I will be, creeping for that. To paying 30% is better than you earning the salary income.
So yeah, so I think so that's the thought behind it being 30%. So as a starting point, so even otherwise, if they would have not said 30%, uh, and if you would have offered it in the highest tax slab rate, it would have been 30%, right? So that is the intent of it being 30%. I think from the digital currency standpoint, I agree with what Ramnik also said. You need to understand that there is a cost of circulating the currency in the economy, right? Whatever cash we deal with. So demonetization, some 13 lakh crores of 13 or 17 something. So lakh crores of circulation of cash was there. So there is a cost of the currency getting circulated within an economy. That cost will become highly efficient if you get this digital currency. Give me a second. Give me a second. Yeah. So that sort of gets highly efficient, and I think entire value chain can sort of benefit from the digital currency if it's done in the right manner. Currently, it's too early to say whether it will be helpful or not. As I said, banks have not reached rural India. Now, for us to say that a digital currency will reach, how effectively they will reach, still I think it will take time. But I think what one thing at least COVID has done is we have maybe leapfrogged from banking to fintech solutions, something like wallets, e-wallets, etc. Because if you see, the normal expectation was you will have a bank account, you will then move to debit card. At least that's how we moved. So you had a bank account, then after a point in time you started having debit card, credit cards, and now you are using e-wallets. That's how we moved. And if you actually see data, more than I think 60% actually don't have debit cards. They don't use debit cards itself, but then they have started using e-wallets. So the journey has, with COVID, what has happened is they have been able to leapfrog the banking thing and get more efficient with it. So of course, at a conceptual level, it makes sense that if a digital currency were to come in, we might even the entire value chain will benefit, right? So that holds true, but then we'll need to see as to how it goes. I agree that it's the right thing to do. So before, there it also creates a lot of confusion. 1% TDS, etc. It's you don't even know who has to deduct, who has to pay. So there will be like 1,000 operational issues which will come in. But the fact is that they have made it as a point to say that it will be taxed. I think that's, I personally feel that it's a welcome move, so that there is some level of control and some level of even data points which will come in. Government will also know that who is doing transaction, because there will be some who will offer 30% tax and be happy with it, right? So in that sense, I think it's a good move.
Thank you, Sheshadri sir. So the kind of information you shared about the data collection from government side, this was quite important in my opinion. And now, since you talked about market trends and how India will move ahead, so there's this particular emerging market trend of artificial intelligence. I'd like to know what kind of shift does finance have for AI? Is there any space for AI in the finance field? If it has, what kind of picture are we looking into? Now, this time I'd like to break the cycle and invite Ramnik sir first.
Okay. So it give me, back to my, starting of my career phase, when I started my career, So when you talk about the AI today, so when I started my journey in my career, so I started in a typical government company, So no, so it was, that the kind of the process, the kind of the thing was there. So because we are not in that artificial intelligence at that time, so 20 years back when I started the journey, so it was typically, the way we operate, like, by khata normally I say, is it that? No, I'm not talking about that we are writing by hand, but I was talking about that we have a software system, ERP system was there, but it was not so integrated, So because when I talked about that, at the ERP system which we was having that, so it was not talking to each other. When I say talking to each other, like government is talking today of integrated the 7 engines, road, jal, thal, vayu, and all that stuff. So similarly, it was there. So when you finance system is there, it has to integrate. Finance is nothing is but the heart. Normally you call it. Whether it's the sales, whether the purchase, because there are two legs which goes out and which comes in now. Okay, which I learned in my career. So both are integrated. So both has to be integrated. So it was not integrated. Okay, so there is a whole manual process happens through that integrating all that stuff. Then I moved to the new phase that when the globally is moving to SAP environment and all that stuff. Where you have an integrated system there. So that phase of the life was there. So then once we move to that level, then world is also getting changed more faster, more agile, because you have to give more delighted experience to your customer when you talked about that. And when you buy the material also, you also have more agile, because when you getting the material, they want efficient system from the organization to make the payment faster. So when they deliver it, that because everybody's stuck with the working capital, so they don't have the time, because there are different method to get it there. So you have to move to that level. So this is what exactly happened, that so being typical, the kind of the Akbar rules to the digital world, which we moved up there. Then we, in terms of the finance part there, so we move all the mundane tasks. Normally I called it that repetitive tasks which you happens with the teams do there. So we created the carved out, I will say, one of the shared service centers. So that the carving has happened over the finance function over a period of time. Because the objective was to that you should work on the non-value added to the value added task. So we tried to remove all the non-value added piece from our existing org structure to a different center there. So there you're just like doing a mundane task. It's like that, for example, if you go to any factory, so of the factory of the cars and all that stuff, so there the die is there, so that the each process is robotic now. So that is what exactly happened with the finance also. So when if I talk about to the order to cash cycle, so when you do the billing to the customer, the money comes to the from the customer. So you have an automated banking interface. When I say interface, in terms of the host to host, earlier what you used to get, the sale guys get order from the customer. If he get the check in his hand, he feel proud, and he go to the people at that location and deposit and all that stuff. We moved out of that part, because then the digital things are there. You need not to collect the checks. You have RTGS, all that stuff sort of moved over that prior times. So this is what exactly happened from the customer side. Similarly, from the payment side, the same thing has happened. So then you have a scan system there. So invoice getting scanned there. I still remember when I used to work there. So I have a one bank in that location. So if I have to withdraw the money, I have to go and fill the pay and slip and get the token and get the money from the bank side. So similarly, the industry was also doing the same thing. So if the vendor is supplying the material to you, he will issue the invoice. So you get it, process it at different levels, because the material has come, you verify and all that stuff, and then you make the payment. When we move to the digital or shared service center, so the material is getting supplied at different part of the country, and your bill is processing somewhere in the call center or maybe the shared service center, and supplier is getting the payment on the real-time basis, that he is having a call center setup there to provide the full information, so where his invoice is stuck up. So this is what exactly happened over a period of time. So even we didn't stop at that level. Once you put up that shared service center, you move to that part. So now the things came there, but once we have reached to that level, what next? So then this is what comes, when I say machine learning, not only I will say robotic process, which already done it, because it is for the repetitive tasks. So then, this was the things when we came to the artificial intelligence, the machine learning. So I still remember, so in one of the conference globally, I was there. So I was sitting there. So then some, friends from Big Four were making the presentation there. So he was telling us the world is getting changed there. And your CEO should not ask the CFO, so which geography I sold this material in terms of the revenue mix and all that stuff. And Alexa will be there. In the morning, he will come and he simply asks the Alexa, so tell me the revenue for the day and geographically how it is spread. I thought that I will, I have to change my role now. I need to go to the sale. Because if everything is coming from that Alexa to the CEO, so what value add I will do it? This is what the transition happened in the finance function. From working from the non-value added to the more value added task. So moving all that, non-value added task to the shared service center, where you put up the robotic process, put the artificial intelligence and the machine learning. For example, let's talk about the today world of the GST. So government also has moved in terms of artificial intelligence. In today world, so GST officer track through artificial intelligence only. When they do on the audit right now, and they get the catch hold of the persons. So you read many frauds which are happening, where the people have issued the fake GST invoices, and they are passing the credits to us. So we also receive the summons from them. So now they are not doing the old methodology and all that stuff. So they are also doing the artificial intelligence, because if you look at the process is very simple. You bought the material 100 rupees, you pay 10 rupees to the government, and other guy is getting the credit because he's receiving the material. So there is no chain break, but still government is not getting the money. That is what the smartness. We have a fertile mind. So we have issued the credits to the person and he's taking the credit, but government didn't get the money back into the system. So they did the artificial intelligence, in terms of, catching hold of that guy. So similarly, things are getting moved. So similarly in the finance function also. So then we move from, that non-value added task to the value added task, co-partnering with the, CEOs in running the business, strategic decisions, in terms of strategic deals, in terms of the, tax planning perspective. Okay. So when I say tax planning perspective, that, for example, that how you should have set up your new machinery when the budget announced that you have one more year, for that 15% tax rate there. And they come out with the rules that how much you can, continue with the existing assets, which is say that 20% you can do it, and the other whatever expansion you do it, then you can avail of 15% there. But there is a rules there that you have to follow that. So your mind and fertile mind is working on that side. So your mundane task is gone to that with the help of artificial intelligence, which helps to do the data analytics, which helps to take the corrective decision, in terms of when we talk about the revenue maximizations and the EBITDA margins, which we normally talk about when we talk to the investors and the stakeholder concerned. So this what intelligence has, helped the industry. So when I say artificial intelligence, robotic is not on the industrial automation. It is in the finance automation also has happened. We reach to that level, and hopefully the things will go on, and the day will come when the Alexa will be coming and talking to you also, and you will ask the Alexa what is the budget implications for the student learning. So he will also talk about Akbar and give a story for that perspective.
Thank you, sir. I personally love how you share anecdotes for everything. So it's quite interesting. And since you talked that finance is the heart, it reminded me of one thing I'd like to share. Once I was attending a panel talk of Mr. Sridhar Venkat. He's CEO of Akshay Patra. So he at that time said that if an organization is a car, finance is the fuel. Without it, nothing can move. If you will have everything but the car is still at the line, nothing will ever happen. So having said that, I request Sheshadri sir to please share his opinions now.
Yeah, I think Aman, see, um, one thing I sort of understood. So one, I think I have had the privilege of working in MNCs, right? PNG, J&J at the very start of my career. So some of AI tools, etc. I have I had worked maybe say a decade earlier versus what we see now. And one thing I realized, right? So see, in finance, say a decade back, a finance person would be, say, a finance leader. Even for example, a CFO would be a finance leader with, say, good understanding of business. Right? That's how the role expectation would be. I think what has changed over a decade is now a a finance person or a CFO is a business leader with expertise in finance, right? So there is that shift which has already happened. So see, any compliance issue, any control issue, these are all threshold competencies. So if you mess up something, then you will have to hear for it, or you will have to you will be held accountable. But if you are compliant, then that is the base expectation, right? You are expected to be compliant, you are expected to be efficient, everything, you are expected to do the right thing. Nothing sort of really stands out in that. What really stands out is how you are able to contribute business partnering, how your long-term strategy of the organization, change management, and hence you will see that finance is more and more sort of becoming a general management sort of role, where finance leaders are becoming CEOs. Because see, finance is one function where you can completely zoom in to any transaction. Like I am the CFO, right? If I want, I can get into a particular invoice of a vendor to that level. I can get into a PO of that vendor, and I have understanding of the entire process. I know what is GRN and all these kind of things. I can completely zoom out, and I can make a 10-year glide path for my company, which are the brands we need to launch. So that entire spectrum, you will find that majority of the functions don't have. Even for that matter, a CEO will not have that level of understanding of finance processes, back-end processes, but a finance will have. Finance understands almost, so he will have a good understanding of supply chain, right? He will have good understanding of sales, commercial finance. He will have good understanding in terms of, not in terms of marketing you need to develop over the course of time, but also you will have understanding in terms of what are some of the initiatives which work. What are some of the, so do we spend in digital or do you do print? What works better? What is search? How does spend on Facebook happen? So all those kind of things a finance clearly understands. So he is one function who has the end-to-end picture of it. Coming to AI, right? see the issue in today's, and wearing say my business hat or say a modern CFO hat, the issue in today's world is not availability of data. See, a decade back you actually didn't have data. That was the issue, because you lot of manual systems, to what Ramnik also said, lot of manual processes, right? The task of getting being efficient in that process itself was the objective, versus trying to analyze and capture data and all those kind of things was very laborious. Excel based, lot of things were there. So availability of data was not there to extent. So hence over a decade everyone moved to SAP, ERP. So now availability of data is not an issue. You will have thousands of data. So you will have data where you get from Amazon how many folks. So you maybe you do a ad, you place a digital banner for a product, you will know how many and you will see that. So suppose you click for some, you click some shoe which you like, right? When you are seeing some other, you are reading Times of India news, you will see that banner coming in. The shoe which you had clicked, you will see Mintra ad coming in showing that shoe, right? And you can actually click it and purchase. The in the back end, companies get all such data, and they actually try to target the consumers. So we get data as to how many of the consumers click, how many of the within say 100 clicks, two went to and landed on the site, and one purchased. So that is the conversion rate, 1:100. Basis that you can say that if I spend whatever $100,000 on a particular campaign, what is the sales I will generate? So this is the world we are living in now, right? So what AI does is it helps in getting insights from this data, right? So data availability is there, but the data availability is, everything is a data, right? Everything is so huge now. You do a campaign, you will get all types of data. But the issue is for you to get an insight out of that data, you will have to declutter at least 80% of the data, right? End of the day, how do you arrive at an insight? There is massive amount of information. You sort of declutter it, try to identify a trend, try to see what has worked, what how is it different from other competition brands, all those kind of things. AI is a amazing tool which helps you declutter many of the stuff, so that it becomes you as finance, you become highly efficient, because otherwise you would have to declutter that 80% of data, where you would be spending time on. Now with AI, that does it for 80% of the data. It declutters. You are able to then see that 20% and then arrive at an insight and drive business, right? So this is the direction we are going in, and this is again, it's evolving even to a farther level. So uh, nowadays even AI can also throw out insights as well, right? So one is us using AI to come up with insights. Other is there are you if you see stock market, I'm not sure if you follow stock market. Nowadays there are various AI tools which sell in if you hit a particular stop loss. And so in say a decade back, you would find the volatility. So here there is no sort of thinking or holding, like it's black and white. So AI, it will be black and white. So if you hit a particular level, it will sell. That's what you are actually seeing now, and hence the variations are also happening like that. So AI is
Sheshadri,
there in. Yeah,
just to add, when you say that stock market, so it was Harshad Mehta actually. So now it is a AI, you know.
Right. So I think so, yeah, AI is there to stay, I think, and finance plays a more sort of leadership role in ensuring what are the IT requirements or capability requirements of an organization. Nowadays you find that CFO also heads IT, many companies, and that is the reason, because you don't need to be a technical software engineer to understand IT requirements of the organization. IT capabilities of the organization, right? So I have deployed like for sales, this is the capability which it needs, real time data analysis and those kind of things, right? I think I've taken more time. Back to you.
Thank you, Sheshadri sir. And just talking about AI, I like something to add as well. Just yesterday, I was reading about algo trading. So it is an AI which actually search for arbitrage opportunities over the markets. Now, requesting Kapil sir to please share his opinions.
Yeah, well, this was very well explained by Ramnik and Sheshadri. Probably I will give you a couple of more examples from the real life. You know, so like Sheshadri mentioned that whenever you go for online shopping and you get to see so many things which actually surprises you. Oh, so somewhere, sometime you would have clicked something, and based on that, AI starts throwing results. In fact, that actually scares us, or probably make us mindful to do away with the dangerous websites. That was on a lighter side, by the way. But this is the power of AI, and whether it is the real world, anywhere, including finance, it is going to be very impactful. So let's. I mean, instead of mine, let me give you one example from someone like Make My Trip, and I'm giving you a real life example of a finance department of such company. They were it was a decent company, working well, but not on that kind of growth trajectory which it should have. So they went on to this AI thing, some data analytics, of course, before AI. And what they found, that they were actually what my both co-panelists mentioned in their examples. What they found, that that particular uh, kind of customer, ultimately the conversion rate, which Shadri just mentioned, was not so good. Uh, and why? The reason was, someone logging in from, say, iPhone, was being given the cheapest hotel, for that matter. Probably a person carrying iPhone. And again, please don't, all the audience, don't take it otherwise, that I have iPhone, I don't have. It's a general thing I'm trying to tell you what happened actually. The general impact was, if someone is carrying iPhone, probably he may not be interested in the cheapest hotel, but a slightly higher category hotel. So that's how they segregated the whole consumer behavior, and their AI started throwing those kind of results based on the kind of phone or tab they were logging from. And in the next quarter itself, their sales was 3 times of the previous quarter, only because of this. So that is the power of AI, and this was done by the finance team of that organization. If we talk about our organization, we have almost 60,000 people across India, and almost everyone spending money, for client work or otherwise claiming back. We call it as out of pocket expenses. I remember, people putting all the invoices on a sheet and then sending it to finance department, and we checking each and every voucher, and then approving it, then finally paying it. Now it is more of automated, and in coming times, the AI, what it is going to do, or what it is doing even today, you are at a petrol pump, you are filling your car, you need to claim that petrol bill. You have to just put that petrol bill in front of your mobile camera. It will click the picture, it will fill the whole expense sheet. All the details will be captured through AI from that invoice, put in that. You just need to check that, enter. It is filled on the spot, within whatever minutes settled by the organization, or few hours. You will get your money back. So that is the power of AI, which can be used everywhere in finance. And as I said, whether it is finance or anywhere, last 3 days I was traveling, I was in a hotel, and I was remembering that how we used to open a room door, putting a key in the keyhole at some point in time. Now it is a card. But you know, the card, again, the problem, you can't keep that card along with your mobile, otherwise it may get deactivated. But going forward, and there are many hotels which are having the digital lock. Probably in some time we will have our we need to show our mobile to that lock, it will open up. And this journey will not stop here. Probably a face recognition functionality will come, and something else. So I mean, the point I am trying to make is, in finance, I mean, and I can talk about I mean, for hours, where all we can use AI, and my learned friends will have counter ideas on that, because it's a never ending journey with a lot of potentials. We are nowhere today in terms of AI, and we will achieve heights. Probably next 20 years we will see the kind of magic the AI will have, even in finance. So as Ramnik mentioned, that you know, probably we will get into more and more value added jobs as CFO or as finance person with the help of AI, and taking our organizations at heights.
Thank you so much, sir. This was a very comprehensive and a learned answer. Now I request to open the floor for questions and answer. I request our curious audience to please put their questions in the Slido window, which is available on their screen now. And to accommodate as many questions as we can in the promised time, I request the panels that I'll take one name for every question. So I'll jumble it myself, and then I'll pick one panel to answer any one question. Is it all right with the panel?
Yep.
Thank you. So I invite Priyanka to please ask her question.
Good evening, panel. My question is, will the efforts mentioned in the budget able to compensate for the negative impacts of pandemic on human capital accumulation?
Ramnik sir, please.
Okay, so when in this budget, when we talked about that, you know, the government put more on the infrastructure and the long-term perspective. So whatever the announcement they made it, right? So because whatever this announcement has been made, which really will, what will happen, to be honest with you. So when, you know, this cycle is up in terms of that, so because a lot of investment will come, and because that will create more employment in the economies, so that will really help you know, in terms of getting whatever the lost has happened in the 2 years, to be honest. That so everybody suffered there when we talked about wave 1 and wave 2 there. So we in our organization, we were also struggling, so because everything went into the standstill position at that time. So because the money is the only, when we talked about the you know, to survive in this world, so that when the liquidity got stuck up there, so because that liquidity has been created now over a period of 2 years with this pandemic, in that situation with wave 1 and wave 2 there, with the government through the different, you know, means, whether it is a the announcement of the stimulus package which they give it to there, whether it is a Manrega scheme is there, which they, you know, flip to the economic to that perspective. Now these, all these things will, you know, get it over, because when this, you know, economy revival is there, and when the investment is there, so that will really help us to create more employment. And because government is more focusing that, you know, what we talked about, that because of this geopolitical issues across the world, when because people have a negative thought about the China and bringing everything into the country, so setting up the gift city in Gujarat, because these all are, you know, directional steps towards, you know, creating the employment itself in the country, you know. So that eventually will really help, so everybody in the you know, country, because we are more focusing on the now, you know, talking about the semiconductor part there. So because everybody we are facing, I don't know how many of might you be facing that, even if you, the time was there when we are not talking about, you know, holding a vehicle at our own situation before pandemic, because everybody was relying on Ola and Uber, because now the things that got changed, you know. So if you look at the auto industry right now, if you go to them, so they will say wait for 18 months. So depending upon the, you know, model which you are buying there, just see the change there, you know. So there is there is the negative part there, pandemic has created there, but there are some positive side there. The auto industry was in that terrible situation, to be honest, before pandemic. So now the things are getting revived, with this, that part. So that will really, negate the impacts which your question was there. As I'm able to answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ramnik sir. The next question is for Sheshadri sir and will be asked by Pratik Vaidya. Pratik, please. Pratik, you are on mute.
Good evening to the panel. Like my question is, there are these emerging technologies like DeFi or decentralized finance, as we say. Do you think in future these technologies will pose risk to traditional banks or the fintech industry that we are living in today?
Thanks, Pratik, for the question. See, I think when you say, does it pose a risk? I think traditional banks have to adapt themselves, right? And I think that's true for that will remain true, but I don't think they'll become extinct. The way of see, and you yourself so see a decade back. I don't remember when I actually went to bank last, maybe 4 5 years, I guess. So I actually don't remember. And if you see, so at least my father generation, so you guys are young, right? So you wouldn't have actually gone physically to a bank as well. But in my so I still remember my father getting his passbook updated. So those were the days where they would actually go with the passbook and then get updated. And if you actually see now, the banks themselves have sort of evolved. The amount of large number of transactions which the bank do nowadays has evolved massively, which we don't see on the face of it. The back end process of even global banks has changed. It has become very like digital, and all those things are there. Fintech themselves are actually making the banks work differently. The newer concepts, definitely I think they will challenge both fintechs as well as banks. So nowadays, if you see that all these fintechs have started giving out credit as well, and they have a very sound ecosystem which banks don't have. Because and I'll give you a case in point. So even a fruit vendor, so a fintech company, something like even all these Paytms and Phone Pays, etc. So they have a trend of the revenue coming in. So daily, if you take a particular account, he would know that daily 1,000 rupees comes in by sale of whatever fruits and stuff like that. So he can actually give out credit of 300 or whatever to that fruit vendor. So fintech companies are in a position where they can tie up and give out loans. Now bank actually has no information of this, and it would be good credit, because the end of the day the way it would work is they would take interest of whatever 14% and deduct from whatever money comes in. So you have completely bypassed the process of asking for loans, security against loans, and all these kind of things. And even then, you don't find, say, MSMEs and all these guys getting credit. Similarly, I think the new concepts, the new age technologies which will come in, will actually threaten even fintech uh, options. And bank, of course, they will be challenged. I guess they will be challenged, but then they will have to adapt. Still, it's a big industry to say that they would become extinct, but then it will be a very evolved. You wouldn't be able to recognize banking system. So if you time travel, if anyone from 70s comes in today's world, he will be completely lost, right? And that's how it will be in 30 years. In 20 to 30 years, when you guys will be what around 40 or 50, you will find that banking has completely evolved, right? So that would be true. Back to you.
Thank you, sir. I completely agree with this one.
Thank you, sir. The next question is for Kapil sir and will be asked by Aditya Gupta. Aditya?
Thank you, Aman, for the opportunity. Good evening, panel. My question is especially focused towards the current trend, that is startups. And recently they have a lot of IPOs have been coming up. So my question is sort of related to that. So my question is, how is the exercise of Esop taxation affecting startups? And what reforms were taken during in this current budget to address the disadvantages of ESOPs?
Thanks, Aditya, for the question. Uh, I totally understand your concern about ESOPs in startups. And rightly so. So government is doing a lot for startups. We have seen that in our this budget and even previously. But you are right. In terms of ESOP, probably if you'll ask me, I am not very happy with what government has done so far. Again, there would be right reasons for that. Uh, in this budget, what I see is the surcharge on the capital gain. It has been capped to 15% from the effectively 37% for the higher holding, which is a positive move, I would say, very positive move. But on the other hand, probably one the holding period for shares, if I mean that needs to be taken at par with the stock market, that 12 months. The second thing is the taxation is more on accrual than the actual realization of ESOPs, which is actually impacting. I mean, I know a lot of friends who have ESOPs have taken loan to pay taxes on that without knowing what they will finally achieve when they realize that ESOP. So I totally agree in terms of your concern that that is something which is not there. Probably government needs to come up, because on one side their intent is to work with the startups, and they strongly believe that startups is going to be our GDP engines in coming times, in terms of employment, in terms of export, in terms of innovations. So when that is a clear intent, probably in terms of taxation, to attract more and more investment, to attract more and more encouragement, they need to come up with more tax ops, I would say.
Thank you, sir, for your answer.
Thank you, sir. The next question will be asked by Avneet Kaur. And for this question, I request Ramnik sir to please answer. Avneet?
Good evening, panel. So, my question is related to privatization. As we know, like a lot of news come related to one or the other PSU being privatized. Almost daily, we are hearing such things. And some people feel that privatization is good, while there are other people who do not feel it is very good. So, what are your views on it?
Okay. So, it reminds me back to that part, why you have a different views, So let me talk about, starting with my childhood, why people, prefer the government job as compared to the private job. So see, government job, have a more security, to be very honest, when you see the divergent views there. So because earlier government used to give the pensions also, so it's like that. I will say that it's a tortoise and the rabbit race. Okay. Why I say the tortoise and rabbit race, that when you work with the government, okay, initially you get less, to be very honest. Okay. Because if you get into the PSU sectors or maybe the government sector there, so but you have amenities there, lot of the perquisites which you encash, like what you were talking about, ESOPs. So it's like a government hidden benefits which you encash when you reach at certain age. I came from the very middle class family where my parents were working with the different governments. So what I realized that because I was not having like getting the good money at that times when my parents used to work there. So but what I realized that when they are getting old there, you know so what the get the money from the government in terms of the pension there. Okay, that give you the more more security. In our Indian culture, problem is that though we don't have a social security mechanism, we talk about PF and all that stuff is there, but is there really sufficient the kind of the taxes which we paid over the life of the journey which we spent with the either with the private sector or the government, the kind of the facility. I am very negative about that part. Why I will say that? For example, if you work in the private sectors and whatever you earn it, when you talked about the taxation rates is there with 30% and the different surcharge depending upon the tax brackets you are there. So eventually, if you are earning more than like the people who are earning more than crores of rupees there, so they are tax rate at 42%. But eventually, if you just remember that when your blood is when we talk about finance is the blood for the organization, and when your self blood is gone, okay, at that times, are you getting any benefit from the government side, whatever you have paid over a period of time? Because at that time you need that support from the government side, you know. So that really creates mind of confusion for the people when the privatization objectives came there. Why the banks gone on the strike when they're talking about the privatization of the banks? Because this kind of fear, because we came from the different culture as compared to the globally. If I talk about the European side, if you lost a job also, so they give you the unemployment allowance till the time you get the job there. But in today's world, when we talked about the technology and all that stuff, if you are got redundant because you are doing whatever the X job today, are you get something from the government? Answer is no. That kind of the fear and the kind of the society we live there and the kind of the healthcare expenditure which comes over a period of the life. So that creates, the divergent view, which your question was there, why people feel negative when they move for the privatization perspective, the kind of the benefit they lose it there. But from the agility perspective, if you talked about, so that is more agile in the private sector, because the way we operate it, because ultimately you have to generate the return for the stakeholders. So whether it is for the different stakeholder who has put up the money there, because you have accountable for that, because that you have to work in that sector. So I think from that working, I don't think so that people will feel, normally people talk about that government people are lazy, they don't do the work and all that stuff, but I don't think so that things have got changed over a period of time now. So they also have to work, because the kind of the pressure, even if we talked about the banking, fintech we talked about, if you go to the bank today, even to the State Bank of India, which is typically government bank, talk about, they only have one or two people working there. They have a one single window clearance where he has to clear everything there. So they also have moved to AI and all that stuff, centralization of the things, server is setting somewhere, so they put up the controls there. So you do only face-to-face transaction only for those people who still want to go to the bank, but technically you need not to go to the bank. Bank is coming to your homes, the kind of that part. So I think the more of the social security problem, which government is also working upon the PF and all that stuff, so that we get it. Because to be very honest, when you work in the private sector, you sometimes worried, because when the provident fund goes to the government, so when you get the CTC, you always minus that part when you are in the at the young age there, because you are not worried. Because earlier, what was I was telling you the problem when I started 20 years ago there. So I was lucky because I have the exempted provident fund company where the money got deposited with the company itself, so I was more secured. So if you talk about at that time, you have a different PF organizations which are not integrated at all. Okay. So if you move from one state to another state, you are always worried about that your money will get transferred or not. I'm telling you, this was a typical situation in our country. So whatever you have earned, let's say if you work for 20 years, if we have not moved to that centralization of provident fund and all that, and you are worried that at the end, when I get retired or superannuated at the age of 60, so whatever accumulation has happened or not, whether I will get or not, that kind of the fear, that creates the divergent view for the privatization. I hope I able to answer your question.
Yes, sir, I totally agree with you. Like, people are more worried about their security. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Further, I invite Sheshadri sir to answer Sankarshan's question. Sankarshan, please.
Yeah, thank you, Aman. Good evening to the panel. So my question is on the capital investment. The finance minister announced that it has increased from 1.3% to 2.9% of the GDP. I just wanted your views on how it would affect the Indian economy.
I think we sort of briefly talked about the entire push on capex as well. I think, see, let's understand why capex and what are the choices. See, government can either choose to spend on, say, even revenue and spend items, can spend on increasing subsidies. That's another way of spending whatever revenue you get through indirect and direct taxes, right? So that's one way. The other way is to uh, push behind infrastructure, capital investments. So in long term, the first thing we need to be clear is that capital investment is not a short term thing. It's more strategic, and it's a long term investment which government will do. If you ask me, even 3% of GDP is not. We require actually much more. Uh, we have only the room to invest, say, 3% of GDP in infrastructure, because, say, currently if you see a lot of our country is still in villages. The amount of roads which gets the kilometers of road which are getting done, it's nothing if you compare to a country like China or even other smaller countries. The reason why I say China is geographically China is a massive country, right? It's not small. Geographically it's a massive country, and you should see the infrastructure the way it's and if you have that level of infrastructure, what it will do is the ease of doing business becomes much more, and you become competitive as a country and as a producer, as an organization. As I said, logistic cost, everything. The other thing why I think it will help the economy is also in terms of generating job employment opportunities, right? See, when you do capex, what does it mean? So you construct roads, you construct highways, terminals, and all those kind of things. That creates job opportunities. So if I'm not wrong, I think the PL, the production linked incentive and all this, so that is more to drive investment from the private sector. So there are, the finance minister said, 13 sectors where there are, if with few conditions, if you satisfy, then there is a tax benefit and all those kind of things, mainly again to aid capex investment from private sector. Again, the intent is that, I think she said 60 lakh job employment in a year. So that's the level of thing it will create. So do capex, it will create job employment opportunities. Hence, it will drive demand, it will drive consumption. Given that you are investing in infrastructure, the supply side of things also will become efficient. And hence, the overall value chain becomes more efficient. Demand is there, you are able to meet the supply, and then overall GDP grows. So that is the intent, right? It will happen, but I think from a timeline standpoint, it takes time. So no capex. So if you see capex, roads, etc., themselves take 3 to 5 years for it to be fully operational, right? But then the employment opportunities get created pretty much immediately as the work starts. So of course it will help the economy, but I think we can do much more. The current deficit is completely out of whack, so I don't think we can afford more than 3% at this point in time. But hopefully, as we progress, it should be much more.
Got
Back
it,
to
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Since we are edging towards our promised time, I think we can take just one last question. And for this question, I request Shreyansh to question and Kapil sir to answer. Shreyansh, please go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. So my question is, what will be the downside of such high net market borrowings of 11.2 lakh crores? Like, won't it affect the interest rate? Because bond yields have already shown the consequences just after the announcement of the budget. So what can we like expect more as a result of these high borrowings?
Right, Shreyans. So you are right. It will have an impact. I mean, that's a very obvious thing that such a high borrowing will have an impact. Before getting into this, let me give you some numbers. Probably that will give you the more clarity about this problem. One, the interest. So if I talk about the overall government's expenditure in a year, say next year, the 23 for which budget was presented, approximately 41% of the total expenditure will go in paying interest only, and which is effectively increasing year on year. Now the problem here is everywhere it's a legacy. Again, I really don't want to be political in this, but the fact is this is we are running on a legacy, and it's a vicious circle which is becoming. It's just like, you know, we used to, or probably we to even today we hear about a lot of farmers in villages with those microfinance mahajans and all, that they're more than half of income is going into interest only. The similar story is happening with us as a country. Uh, but I think the only choice we have is to increase our GDP, and that's where this 5 trillion economy concept is coming in. The more and more we invest to increase our GDP, probably the size will get lower in terms of GDP. Effectively, if you see the glide path, and again I am repeating my words, if things are implemented appropriately, so the glide path which government has given for FY26, it says today it is sitting at a 6.5% of GDP as their fiscal deficit, which will go down to 4.5%. And similarly, the debt to GDP, today it is around 63%. It will come down to 56% in FY26. So, you know, right now we don't have any other solution to my mind but to work on our GDP, and that's where all these capital spend and private funding pooling in, crowding in, all those concepts are coming in just to give us a right path towards our GDP growth. Of course, we have lost a couple of years given this pandemic, but this FY25 target we should achieve somewhere in FY26 or at max in FY27, and that's how year on year we will probably keep reducing it. And I wish that in my lifetime I can see India debt free.
Okay, sir. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to thank whole panel for this healthy, rich, and informative discussion. Now, to present formal vote of thanks, I request Abhishek to please come forward.
Thank you, Aman. So I would like to close this session with the formal vote of thanks. Please allow me. So I would like to thank Kapil sir, Ramnik sir, Sheshadri sir on the behalf of Tom's IIT Roorkee for taking out the time to be here today and enlightening us with the panel discussion on Union Budget 2022 and emerging market trends. The session was both inspirational and informational. Your insights about consumer spending trends, effects of pandemic on supply chain and logistics, significance of infrastructure development in overall financial growth, disinvestment of PSUs, role of digital currency in economy, and importance of data analytics and artificial intelligence in fintech for ease of doing business were of great value to us. Your knowledge about the topics is of great value for the future managers here, and it will greatly benefit them along the path. Thank you, Kapil sir, Ramnik sir, Shadri sir, for such a wonderful and engaging panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for your engagement. This was really great to have you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the kind words.
Likewise. Thank you everyone for being an amazing audience.
Thank you, everyone.